mostly with Affinity and Extended formats. He has, I believe, a top 50 in Pro Tour Montreal a few months back, and followed that up with a near top 8 performance at Grand Prix Quebec City. So
Okay.
he's been away from the game for a little while, but he's back and has posted a top 4 finish rather this weekend.
A turn 1 Soldier of the Pantheon going to get things started here for Gerlock, and that is a very important card in this matchup, as there are a lot of cards in Gates' decks that cannot block that card. He's got Frostburn, he's got Boros Reckoner, Rakdos Cackler, if it was leashed, can't block it either. So it does actually slide by a lot of guys, as Gates is just going to play a Temple of Triumph, Scry, and move his turn along. An attack for 2 here from the Soldier, going to put Gates down to 18, and Gerlock just going to pass the turn back. Doesn't mean he doesn't have a 2-drop, because Celestial Charm is a card, but if he doesn't, got to be pretty happy with that, as here's an Ash Zealot from Gates.
And I think, James will be really happy to take kind of a defensive positioning in the matchup. Again, what he's trying to do is just get to Nykthos with a good board presence to Storm Breath Dragon, Overload Mizium Mortars, or some other explosive sequence. So we associate red decks and cards like Ash Zealot with being the beatdown, but James is going to want to try to hold down the fort as much as he can to build up a board and set up a large Nykthos.
Yeah, I think Gates is definitely the defensive deck in this matchup. I don't think that he is a... I don't think he's going to do a lot of attacking. Spider's certainly going to make things difficult, too, to be able to push through. But he wants to just, I think, play some defense, build up a big board. Reckoner does a whole lot of work on boards like this of making so the opponent can't attack. And just play defense, and then unload a Storm Breath Dragon, maybe fly through the air, and Monstrosity it for the damage, kill, and again, set up those large Mizium Mortars to be able to take the game over. You see him taking a look in his hand right now. I think he's got at least one Burning Emissary over there. Not sure if he has a Nykthos in his hand, but that's the thing, and that's the card that really puts this deck into overdrive.
Yeah, Burning Tree Emissary isn't really here to facilitate explosive draws onto the board. It's more about facilitating Nykthos and having an explosive turn through that. So we associate Burning Tree Emissary often with these Firefist Striker draws or what have you, but it's sort of playing a different role in James's deck.
Well, Frostburn Weird's going to be the play. He's got a Sacred Foundry, going to pass the turn back. So, again, he's trying to D-up. Trigger there from the Soldier, remembered by Gerlock. So, Gerlock going to go up to 21. As Gates is going to draw his card for the... Or, excuse me, Gerlock going to draw his card for the turn. He does have a Celestial Charm in his hand, and you saw on the turn 2 where Gates could have attacked with his Ash Zealot, chose not to play defense with it, and then Gerlock served in with the Soldier. And I think he had Charm in his hand then, and it looks like he has Charm in his hand now. So, a little trample action is going to happen.
He cannot target Soldier of the
Oh,
Pantheon
you make a
with
good
Celestial
point.
Charm.
You make a very good point. I think maybe James missed that on the first one.
Alex has copies of God's Willing in his deck.
Sure.
So there is a way for him to...
So that's interesting, because I feel like Gates may have missed that on the first attack, but then he realized it now when this happened. And so first strike's going to happen. Get that out of here. Smiter's going to deal 4 points of damage, because I actually just missed it myself.
I think it was just God. I think it was God's Willing. He was playing around on that first turn.
Okay. Interesting that he took a Moffat for the second attack, but a correct read, as it were. So Gerlock just reloads with a Voice of Resurgence and passes the turn back. Now, one thing that Gates does have to be cognizant of, is that there's a Celestial Charm in his hand that he does have to worry about.
Yes. And I believe James has just picked up a Nykthos, so we might be able to see the extent of his hand with his Burning Tree Emissary. From a board like this, if you haven't really seen the Red Devotion deck in action, something like Burning Tree Emissary and Nykthos could turn on an Overloaded Mortars or a Dragon plus other action this turn. So the Nykthos really allows this deck to go from 0 to 60 in a moment's notice.
Yeah. Really, really scary stuff. And as Gates does figure out exactly what he wants to do on his turn, don't forget that after this game, we will have trivia time for you guys. 6 months of premium we'll be giving away during our semifinals. So after this game is over, we'll be bringing it back to the booth. Patrick will explain the rules. I will have the very difficult question for you, and we'll announce our 6-month winner at the conclusion of our semifinals here.
James trying to noodle through. There's a lot of math when you have your Nykthos.
Oh, I like it. Start by attacking.
That implies a pretty big hand from James if that's how he's going to start the turn.
Let me get in here with old Ash Zealot.
And here we go.
There's Storm Breath. So really, really nice turn there from Gates. Also able to pump up Frostburn Weird if necessary. You guys do see Storm Breath Dragon on the screen. Very, very good against a green-white deck, of course. Flying, haste, protection from white, plays defense admirably, and then he's got so much mana that Monstrosity is very realistic, and he can just kill him basically in 2 shots in the air.
Yeah, I mean, Monstrosity is happening next turn if James feels like it.
That's one of the things that I like about his deck in this matchup is that now the Storm Breath is here and Monstrosity is actually, it's able to happen. He can just simply go, all right, Monstrosity, attack in the air, and then just like chump with all these stupid ground creatures and just kill you that way.
Yep.
Knowing that he needs to play around Selesnya Charm. And it's also a little bit scary right now, too, that Gerlock is just passing with 5 mana up, because that represents a lot of things from a green-white deck. Again, because these players do have access to each other's deck lists, James can have a pretty good idea of what could be coming. A card like Boon Satyr, a card like Advent of the Worm. We already know about the Selesnya Charm in hand. He knows that Gerlock has access to God's Willing in his deck list. He has 3 of those, so there's a lot of things to be wary of when a green-white deck just passes with 5 mana open.
Yeah. And James may want to just Monstrosity the Storm Breath Dragon because of the Monstrous trigger. Alex is going to be compelled to cast spells if he has them in his hand, so James can kind of get a sense of the extent of Alex's action here. And this is sort of what I was talking about before the match started. You know, Alex is not going to do very much to break up James's action. So James's explosive Nykthos hands are just going to happen.
Yeah, it's almost like James is goldfishing to a certain extent.
Right.
You know, where his deck is always going to get to be able to do what it wants to do. As here's an Advent of the Worm in response to the Storm Breath Dragon trigger, so a 5/5 is going to come into play. We'll see how much that Storm Breath is going to deal. Looks like there are only 2 cards hanging out in Gerlock's hand, so that would knock Alex down to 17, and attack from the dragon would knock him down to 10. So it's going to take a couple of turns to take this one over. Advent of the Worm, big boy.
And keep in mind, James is at a fairly low life total, and he has to play. He already knows that Selesnya Charm is available, and Advent of the God's Willing is a card in Alex's deck as well. So he's not quite as safe as it appears on the surface. There are possibly backdoor draws that allow Alex to kill him here. So this is not him slow rolling. He has to be cautious. That's the last of it. The last of his Nykthos mana.
Yeah. And there's one thing also don't forget either, is that a Johnny Call of the Pride had 2 of in this deck. So we could see, a card like Advent Worm just go to the skies and then be Selesnya Charmed for enough damage to kill him. So he needs to tread very lightly here. Yes, Gerlock only does have 2 cards in his hand, but they could be the perfect 2.
Right.
And Gates is going to get in with the dragon, so he's basically saying you have to have the perfect 2 of a Johnny plus Selesnya Charm to kill me this turn. So Gerlock is going to untap. He's going to take a draw step, and again, we do know that he has Selesnya Charm in his hand right now. Gates knows that information as well, so Gates knows that he needs to play around at least one of those, potentially more.
Yep. Pretty harrowing turn for James here, just sweating it out.
Yeah, it's not the best feeling in the world.
If James gets on tap, he's a huge favorite here, but
yeah, I agree with that.
He might not get that chance.
Really a huge reason why I just really do like a Johnny in this deck too, is that it just gets the opportunity just to kill opponent out of nowhere.
A Johnny happens to get better the bigger your creatures are in
yeah.
some respects. The minus is the plus power is better the smaller they are, and a Johnny the minus power is better the bigger they are.
Yeah.
Ben Lundquist's deck on the other side of the bracket, a good example of the small version.
Yes, absolutely. But we've seen its minus ability even in Lundquist's deck finish off an opponent. Getting in the air, a big deal.
A flying double striking Azorius Arrestor, in fact, sent him into his top 4.
Well, whatever it takes.
That is whatever.
Yeah. As Gerlock just has to play land and pass the turn back here. And it looks like Gates may have rolled off a Fanatic for a whole bunch of damage there. So James Gates is going to win game number 1 here against Alex Gerlock. Mono Red Devotion with just that little touch of white. Up a game over Green White Aggros. We're going to bring it back to the booth here for you guys because, as I did mention, it is time for that trivia question. Patrick's going to explain the rules, and I'm going to ask a real toughie.
So Cedric is going to ask you a question about one of the decks that we have in the elimination rounds right now. You are going to tweet that answer at SCG Live and hashtag SCG Premium. The winner, drawn at random, will win 6 free months of Star City Games Premium. It is not who answers first, but rather one person drawn at random amongst the correct answers. So don't worry about speed. That doesn't matter here.
So the question is, if you take a look at James Gates' deck list, in his sideboard, He's kind of got a weird looking 4 of in there that you would often normally find in the main deck of a mono red strategy, especially when you're trying to give the beatdowns. There, a 1 drop that's kind of just hanging out over there. A lot of people wondering, what's that doing in the sideboard? I normally find it in the main deck. And if you're able to name that 1 drop that's hanging out in Gates' sideboard, hashtag your answer with the hashtag of SCG Premium on Twitter, and we will announce the winner who does get this question correct at the conclusion of our semifinal round. So again, do remember that it is about accuracy, not speed, as we do make our way over to the sideboards here. Gerlock's going to be on the play, so we will start there. He does have 3 copies of Unflinching Courage, 3 Rootborn Defenses, 3 Mistcutter Hydras, 3 Celestial Flares, an additional Johnny Caller the Pride, and 2 Pelucranos World Eater. It's interesting, I think, in this matchup because Unflinching Courage is a very easy one to want to sideboard in against a typical red deck. But this is like a bigger red deck, so I'm curious as to your thoughts about how good Unflinching Courage is in this matchup.
If game one is any indicator, the games really aren't about life gain and racing that way. It's just about your board presence. I don't think Unflinching Courage really fits into that model, and James is bringing in 3 additional copies of Chain to the Rocks,
Sure.
which is a tool that regular aggressive mono red decks do not have. So I actually think Unflinching Courage is quite poor to bring in here.
Okay. The rest of those sideboard cards, Celestial Affair, not going to have a lot of targets, Rootborn Defenses, not really that kind of deck. But, to be fair, a card like Mizium Mortars, having Rootborn Defenses to maybe counteract that could be pretty good. But it is kind of difficult to leave up 3 mana the entire time, too.
Yep.
2 Pelucranos World Eater. That one's a little bit interesting too because I know, as you mentioned in your smaller red deck, again that card is a nightmare for you. That's a 5/5, shuts down kind of your army. You have to have active treason for it, and then if it does get to untap, then you have the monstrosity of it that gets to ping off the little 1 and 2 toughness creatures, and that thing is just grown out of control. But in this matchup, again, where this isn't a hyper aggressive red deck, I'm not sure how good Pelucranos is here either.
Yeah, it might be marginal. I actually think that Celestial Flare has a little bit of legs here because it's a reasonable answer to Dragon, especially since James often will not be able to attack with any other creatures on the ground because of various smiters and voices or whatever.
Sure.
That game was James basically trying to keep the ground locked up and let Dragon do its thing.
Okay.
So Celestial Flare actually might fit in kind of nicely with, if that's the way the game plays out, Celestial Flare could be pretty good for Alex.
You take a look at Gates' sideboard over here. 4 Fire Drinker Satyr, 2 Assemble the Legion, 3 Chain of the Rocks, 4 Boros Charmer, Porphyros God of the Forge, and additional Mizium Mortars. You mentioned Chain of the Rocks going to come in. I certainly agree with you there. Porphyros God of the Forge, a card that he's talked a lot about over the course of this weekend, that one in his sideboard has been very, very powerful. And it's a card that Gerlock really has difficulty getting off of the board. And if it's going to stay there for a while, it's going to just spiral out of control, as we saw in that first game, if that's any indication. And then the additional copy of Mizium Mortars, I think, is certainly going to join us. Having 8 removal spells after sideboard, really high-powered removal spells, seems like a really good idea.
Yeah, Perforos is there mostly for other control decks, and it's possible that it has some legs in this matchup as well. The concern that I would have is Selesnya Charm gives Alex an out to it that other decks don't. Other control decks really don't have. And the fact that it's going to be marginal in some games anyway, because James is trying to overwhelm Alex and not nickel and dime him with little like Perforos triggers and Ash Cellar hits. But that said, the matchup probably slows down a little bit in the post-board games with all of James' removal, and Perforos potentially gives him another very explosive play. I think that he definitely wants the additional removal spells. So 3 Chain to the Rocks and the additional Mizium Mortars are coming in, certainly, and I would get Hammer Perforos out of this deck as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Alex's deck is incredibly well suited to fight that card.
You're not really going to be able to take advantage of haste in this matchup. Those 3/3s even aren't really all that great, unfortunately. So we'll see how both players use sideboard, as Gerlock, again, is going to be on the play here. He's already taking a look at his opening 7. Gate's going to lay out his, and we will be underway here in Game 2 shortly. And, of course, if we do have results on what's happening in that Lundqvist versus Calvin matchup, you've got Boros versus Esper on the other side. We'll let you guys know at home for those of you who are rooting for him. Both players are going to keep. Gerlock going to start off with a Temple Garden tapped. And there is the Boros Guildgate, everyone's favorite.
Well, if Jim's going to have it on any turn, it might as well be turn 1, right?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
The least harm.
Let's see what Gerlock's second turn is going to be. There's an Experiment 1 that's off curve.
Yeah.
But better now than later. As Gates is going to play a Mountain. And there's a Frostburn Weird to play a little bit of defense.
And James, again, has Nykthos in hand, so if he has a quality draw here, he's going to get to do his thing.
I've seen him sliding forward a Boros Reckoner too, so a lot of devotion available. And Gerlock is just going to play a Plains and pass the turn back. Again, this represents a lot of things from the green-white deck.
But nothing James really cares about.
Mm-hmm.
That's the critical thing.
A card like Boonsater, not very scary right now. Sledging Charm, not terribly scary either.
It'd be one thing if James had to play something resembling an honest game here, but that doesn't appear to be the case if he has Nykthos in hand.
Gates is going to go down to 18. He's going to cast a Boros Reckoner, and he's likely just going to pass the turn back. Again, just playing defense and just setting up.
Yeah.
Because he knows his role in this matchup is not to be the aggressor. It's kind of tough to be the aggressor against a green-white deck, as here's a Sledging Charm on the end step. Going to make a 2-2 Reduke token in just a moment, and it's going to evolve that experiment one. So a couple of 2-2s out there for Gerlock.
Not that well suited to brawl with Boros Reckoner and Frostburn Weird just yet.
Gerlock going to draw a card here. See what the green-white mage can do to get through that Reckoner and Frostburn Weird. No easy feat to get through those cards.
No.
There's a Plains to start the turn. He does have double green for Advent of the Worm, so most of his spells are going to be online here. You see he's got a couple of cards in his hand. Looks like he's got 3 or 4. He's going to attack here with Reduke.
So this potentially represents, I suppose it could represent Celestia Charm, it could represent Celestial Flare. James wants no part of combat just yet.
I think more than happy to take 2 points of damage, keep his devotion count high, as Gerlock is going to pass the turn back and represent a couple things with that untapped mana. Gate's going to draw his card, looks to be a mountain for the turn, and as you mentioned, he does have Nykthos, so access to looks like 6 mana.
Yep.
There's Nykthos, there's a Stormbreath Dragon. And there's an Advent of the Worm on the end step. So Stormbreath Dragon, again, going to play defense. And again, I like what Gates is doing this game. Just playing defense, not in much of a rush. He does have to worry about a Worm token now, but Boros Reckoner can likely trade with that Worm token.
Yep.
So Gerlock going to untap and draw his card. Of course, Experiment 1 did evolve into a 3-3. Here's some mana. This might be an Unflinching Courage here.
Perhaps a Johnny.
Ooh, okay. Johnny, a pretty big game, going to pump up on the Worm, going to make it a 10. Basically attacking for 10. You see Gates is going to check that, and it is going to become a double strike flyer. So basically a 10 power attacker right now. And one that Stormbreath Dragon can't tussle with. Now with attack for 10 plus a Sledging Charm. Sledging Charm would represent 4 points of damage, so this could be an attack for 14 here.
Pretty harrowing for James here.
Yeah. It's a bit scary to take a blow like that.
I feel like if you're in James's spot, you almost certainly can't block, because all you're doing is chumping 4 damage with your dragon.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, because you don't really want to block because it feels like you're throwing away your dragon, but maybe saving all that life might be worth it. Not entirely sure. Because one thing that he could die to on the next turn is very simply is Alex saying, all right, a Johnny, give my Worm +1/+1, God's willing, give it pro red, kill you. Because he's going to end up taking 10 from the stack, going down to 6, which is a very convenient number for how that play lines up. You see Gates really considering, I think, chump blocking here, Patrick.
Yeah, no, yeah, he's just taking the hit. I understand there's cards you're worried about, and there's the potential to die in the next turn, but I don't think throwing away your Stormbreath Dragon for 4 damage leads to a win against any of the cards you're trying to play around here.
Okay. Looks like Fnatic Mogi was rolled off the top there for Gates. His Nykthos can add him 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mana, so he has access to 8 mana, and that's not including a land drop yet, or a potential Nykthos as well.
So
you see him doing the math.
Is there some potential for Alex to actually die from this spot? How much is Fnatic for? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then the next one's 9, so that's 17 if he has 2 of them.
He just rolled by 2 of them, and he has a Nykthos in his hand, so we have a big turn coming.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy. Buckle up.
Yeah, this could be lethal from nowhere, basically.
You see him moving around his resources, trying to figure out exactly how much damage can I deal, where does it need to go. This has to be a very uncomfortable feeling if you're Gerlock.
Yeah.
All right, he's going to start by activating Nykthos for
That's
mana.
7 red in the pool. Oh boy.
Yep. 7 minus 2 is 5. 5 plus 3, 4, 5, 6, 5 plus 7 is 12.
Now
Minus 4 is 8.
8 floating, so that's a trigger for 8 damage.
8 mana floating. Okay.
4 mana floating. So that's 9. That knocks Alex to 3. So if he sends Dragon plus Reckoner, I don't know if there's any way for. I guess he can chump.
I think Dragon just does it, right?
Well, he has to. Oh, he can't even cast Celestial Flare.
Yeah. He just
right. He doesn't have white available.
Yeah. He just says get in there, and
Yeah,
that's
wow.
gonna do it. What an insane turn!
Whoa.
James Gates is going to defeat Alex Gerlock. Mono red Devotion defeats green white aggro. 2 games to 0. As we mentioned before at the top of the match, Gates had already defeated Gerlock once, does it again, and he is moving on to the finals.